One helicopter, 8 minutes, and a 7-kilometer data loop. That's all it took to dismantle a frontline air defense network. Here's how it unfolded. Bait the launch, trick the missile seeker, trace the origin, strike seconds later with a drone. Every step measured, every move deliberate. What does that level of synchronization tell us about how Ukraine's battlefield intelligence has evolved? Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. In one of the quietest sectors along the front, a Ukrainian Mi-24 Hind moved toward an area known for its layers of Russian air defense. The decision looked reckless. The helicopter's shape and thermal signature were impossible to miss, and its loadout, 4 B-8 V-20A pods carrying a full set of 80 S-8 rockets, was far heavier than a crew would normally risk that deep into contested space. Flying low over the Dnipro's edge, it skimmed through patches of fog and old artillery smoke, intentionally creeping into the range of a Russian unit trained to react without delay. For decades, the Soviet-era doctrine behind those units had been built on reflex, not judgment. The rule was simple. If the target was in range, shoot. Hesitation was considered dangerous. That mindset had hardened into habit, perfectly reliable and tragically predictable. Ukrainian strategists understood that predictability could become an entry point. By turning a helicopter into bait, they could prompt a launch, trace the infrared flare of the missile, and pinpoint the firing team long before the Russians could move positions. The pilot's mission wasn't about inflicting damage. It was about lighting up the enemy's sensors like switching on a generator. Every flare of exhaust, every rocket flash, and every moment of visible exposure served a single purpose: draw out the hidden gun that thought it had found an easy kill. The Mi-24 broke into a shallow dive and released its rockets in a single burst. The ripple fire created a wall of noise and smoke that swept across a half-kilometer stretch of riverbank. Explosions scattered through open fields and into the water, erupting column after column of spray and dirt. None of the impacts were tightly grouped. To anyone on the ground, the strike looked uncoordinated, almost careless, a tempting sign that the pilot had misjudged range or control. That small detail achieved exactly what was intended. The Igla missile crew, crouched near a woodland clearing, saw a lumbering target within range and acted automatically. Their command wiring from decades past made the decision for them. They launched an Igla missile at 2:48 p.m., the plume tracing a perfect arc across the sky. In the cockpit, warning tones burst through the pilot's headset, and he dropped the helicopter left, ejecting a stream of ultraviolet countermeasures from the UV-26 system. 12 flares burned white-hot, each hotter than 2,000 degrees Celsius. For the missile's guidance system, tuned to follow a single radiant source against an empty sky, the sudden crowd of heat spots became chaos. The missile veered toward a patch of burning debris where the last rockets had hit, detonating harmlessly against smoldering earth. That detonation was far louder than the Russian crew expected, and it might as well have been a signal flare. Ukrainian signals intelligence units, already scanning the region, picked up thermal and electronic traces from the launch. Using synchronized ground sensors and aerial receivers, they triangulated the coordinates in less than 90 seconds. What would once have been a delayed report now became an instant targeting packet, transmitted directly to the next link in the chain. The pilot had played his part perfectly. What looked like a failed attack had delivered precise data right to the operators waiting to strike back. For Ukraine's planners, this moment represented a reversal of everything the Russian doctrine stood for. Exposure, once considered an unforgivable mistake, had become an instrument. The helicopter, designed to intimidate with rockets and cannon fire, was now a lure in a much faster kind of warfare, one where a pilot's survival depended not only on armor or countermeasures, but on how fast the enemy revealed itself. As radio relays carried the Igla's coordinates down the Ukrainian network, a new phase of the operation began forming within minutes, driven by the heat signature that one hasty missile had left behind. 8 minutes after the Igla missile burned out over the riverbank, a Ukrainian FPV drone lifted off from a tree line 10 kilometers away. Its operator already had a targeting coordinate packet: latitude, longitude, and estimated distance, transmitted directly from the signals unit that had traced the missile's launch. No call for clearance, no delay for verification. The data skipped every layer of command that would normally slow the process. Instead, the drone controller received a short digital ping that meant one thing: engage immediately. The race wasn't against an enemy on the ground anymore. It was against time, before the Russian team could change position or cover their tracks. Flying low at close to 160 kilometers per hour, the drone hugged the uneven terrain, its small camera bouncing as it passed over brush, craters, and the edges of shallow trenches. Each rise in the earth gave it a brief moment of concealment. The feed cut through small bursts of static as the operator adjusted manually to avoid trees. What made the system powerful wasn't just its speed, but the way information moved. Fluid, direct, unbroken by formality. On this battlefield, the connection from signal intercept to strike trigger had compressed into minutes. While the Russian crew still reported their failed launch through a chain of command, the Ukrainian side had already dispatched its counter. Autonomy had replaced bureaucracy. Ukrainian units were trusted to act on verified sensor data without waiting for written confirmation. The shrinking decision loop gave them a kind of precision that traditional militaries often lose in the fog of hierarchy. The drone's operator watched the coordinates drift into alignment on a small screen, counting distance down from several hundred meters to less than 100. The closer it drew, the clearer the shapes became. Patches of uniform, a small heat plume from still active launcher electronics, and the corner of a woodland clearing scraped bare by boot prints. At 2:56 p.m., the drone made its last correction, stabilizing just a meter above the ground. It skimmed forward past bits of torn camouflage netting and burst into the clearing. The camera showed only half a second of the Igla tube before the image vanished in a flash. The high explosive charge, barely 1.5 kilograms, detonated exactly where intended, between the soldiers and the launcher. The sound reached the monitoring team seconds after the transmission cut off. No lingering feed, no confirmative message, just silence where radio chatter had been. Within that short window, a local network that had operated smoothly under old doctrine lost its confidence. Nearby crews reported hearing the blast and went dark, switching radios to encrypted reserve channels. Word of the hit spread quickly through their communications grid. By evening, Russian commanders circulated new directives that shifted engagement authority upward. From that point on, no MANPADS operator was allowed to open fire without approval from headquarters. The standing rule that once rewarded rapid responses now demanded verification and signed consent. This single adjustment reshaped the flow of their entire defensive system. Launch authorization now depended on relay communications, which meant delays during electronic interference or bad weather. Field units forced to hold fire risked missing fleeting targets, reducing the network's ability to protect supply convoys or field command posts. Ukrainian pilots noticed the slowdown almost immediately. Mi-8 transports began flying wider arcs over contested zones, and reconnaissance drones loitered longer, observing positions that had once been too risky to approach. That hesitation, fostered by one tactical deception, turned a brief encounter into a structural weakness spanning kilometers of front. The helicopter had drawn the missile intentionally, but the result rippled far beyond that hillside. Each moment of indecision added seconds of freedom for Ukrainian drones and aircraft. Each order for confirmation created an opening in the coverage grid. What began as a single bait mission now stood as an example of how modern combat rewards timing over power, where every decision rests on the thin edge between instinct and delay. The true outcome of that mission was never the blast itself, but the pause it forced inside a system built on reflex. Ukrainian planners had shown that hesitation could be more destructive than any missile. Modern warfare now revolves around compressing reaction time, shrinking every second between detection, decision, and strike. Accuracy still matters, but timing defines survival. On that front, data moves faster than armor, and communication outruns firepower. One calculated risk, flying a single helicopter into danger, reshaped how both sides measure control. Sometimes a split second of exposure rewrites the rhythm of an entire war front, altering how fear and speed coexist.